Okay, this is going to be a series of videos that I'm going to do. Hey, sweetie. This is going to be a series of videos that I'm going to be recording shortly after I've woken up to study on my abilities for lucid dreaming. And in order to do that, I need to have a journal entry, and sorry, I need to keep my mind going. To do that, I'm going to be recording what I remember from my dreams, if I can remember anything at all. And tonight is 2:29 a.m. at October 27, 2012. Well, what I can remember from my dream is that earliest I can remember is that I was going through... No, I can't even remember further back than that. I was with Batman and Robin, and it seemed to be a futuristic setting, and there was two girls who ended up coming on a ship. I couldn't remember who they were placed in, but it seemed like they came from... they ended up having the same animated style from Batman and Robin, the animated series, one from back in the 90s. And, the two girls ended up coming in on the flying ship, like I ended up saying. And I remember we ended up wanting to go to a destination into the distance, but it was like we were in the clouds, and there was... It was sort of like the Jetsons. Do you know how all their homes were set up in the clouds? And it didn't exactly make sense why they wanted to build homes that high up in the sky. But anyway, I remember grappling hooking from these little trees made out of cars. But the farther along I went, it was like the cars were smaller and smaller. And I didn't want to break them. And for some reason, I ended up looking... They kept on getting smaller and smaller and contained inside glass jars. But I was going along, grappling hooking along. And I could land on them, but I was a little bit more hesitant in doing so, because I was afraid I was going to break them, and those things were small and very nicely detailed, in fact. I ended up seeing some of these, like, flying car stuff that had so many details on it. It was quite impressive. It was almost if they ended up having, like, 20, 30, 40 different futuristic cars just smashed together and in as one. Or one of these things. I remember that, I remember telling myself that was Granny's, my father's mother's, futuristic car that was inside of one of them. And I was kind of hesitant to doing the grappling hook thing anymore. And I ended up sliding downward because it seemed like a very dangerous way, and if I ended up looking down, where everything else seemed to be out in that Jetsons futuristic sky living thing, there was a little hole that this thing ended up going to, as if it ended up leading into a building but wasn't necessarily a hole. It was, we ended up going into an opening in the building. I ended up going down into it, and I remember going down a corridor into a stairwell, where I ended up remembering running across a friend of mine from when I was in grade school. I think his name was Jordan. He was the shortest Jordan. No, he was the shortest kid in 7th, 8th, in my high school and middle school years that I ended up meeting. And I remember there's this game out called Dishonored, and the character you play as has this ability where you can blink and dart ahead forward. And he ended up calling me, hey, Sin. And I was like, Sin? I really didn't do anything in response to him. I remember seeing someone going ahead of him, but I don't know, maybe that was my mind trying to say something. Next thought is that I remember being in with my mother and my mother's boyfriend, Bill, inside of a car, and we ended up pulling up alongside this thing outside, which seemed to have the same kind of feel as the futuristic settings. It was like clouds and orange tint somewhat, and all that sort of thing, but the sky was not the focus at all. I remember we ended up acquiring some kind of goods, baked goods and different things, but I ended up seeing them and I ended up getting the feeling of Spanish selling stuff. You know, like convenience store. That's what I'm trying to say. Privately owned convenience store. But we were providing the base goods, and we don't do that as a service, and it seemed like we were trying to do it as a favor. And we ended up going in there, and I remember like ducking or slouching in the back of the vehicle that we were in. And I remember we ended up pulling up, and I could see a little plastic transparent display case for donuts and stuff like that. And I could tell on the other side there was a very narrow path. It almost seemed like the car was this narrow, now that I notice it. And Mom and Bill ended up leaving the car, but I remember turning over and I ended up seeing a big, huge, giant line pile up of different people coming up, trying to order from this one lady, and it almost seemed like a change from a convenience store into a restaurant, the way that they ended up distributing this stuff. And then she ended up serving my doctor, the one who I ended up getting medication and stuff from. And then I remember hearing the voice of my aunt, and we ended up talking alongside with my mother. And then we ended up having to get into a discussion with my grandmother, not my granny, my father's mother, but my mother's mother, my grandma. That's how we distinguished between the two. And it was like, everything's going to be okay with her. And I was like, no, you have absolutely no idea. None at all. And it was like moments where she was like, yeah, okay. And I have absolutely no idea. And the very last thing that I remember is that I ended up switching my focus over to my palm. And inside of it was like, inside of it was a little pod. A thing where an insect is born from. And it almost reminded me of something from Alien. And it started out like very, very, very small. But then it just like grew slightly bigger different times that I ended up bringing my attention to it. No water. And I ended up hearing a guy talking about what was happening as if it was some kind of documentary. Not documentary. One of those educational things that you see on the Discovery Channel about animals or Animal Planet or something like that. Talking about this thing creating the life of a fly or some kind of bug. And it ended up popping out a maggot, but the voice in my head ended up saying, well, the voice who was speaking in my dream was like, unfortunately, it will never have that chance of the first breath. And then I remember smashing it. And that's when I ended up waking up. You can leave a comment down below of what you believe was any part of my dream having significance, or what do you think mine is. I'm going to try to do this as a daily thing in order to create lucid dreaming in my sleep journals. Okay? Bye.